It was supposed to be just another cold night in Montana until a rusty camper van pulled over on the side of a snow-covered road. Inside, a woman with tangled silver hair and a voice like gravel offered one sentence that would change everything. "Get in before the storm eats you alive." Emily Carter was only 19, holding a 3-month-old baby wrapped in a torn blanket, shaking from more than just the cold. Her parents had kicked her out hours earlier, ashamed, embarrassed, afraid the church would judge them. Her baby's father? Vanished the moment she told him she was pregnant. No money. No shelter. No plan. But fate, it turns out, wears strange disguises. In this case, a cluttered truck and a woman named Iris Monroe, part scientist, part recluse, and very possibly crazy. The cabin she led Emily to was filled with stuffed birds, hanging herbs, and one locked door that whispered of a tragedy buried beneath decades of snow. What Emily didn't know. That door held answers. And the storm outside? It wasn't the only thing she'd have to survive. The sky was bruised purple, heavy with snow, and the only sound that echoed down the winding back road of Pine Hollow, Montana, was the crunch of boots, too thin, too soaked, against the frozen asphalt. Emily Carter had never felt silence this loud. She adjusted the baby against her chest, instinctively shielding him from the bitter wind that sliced through her hoodie like it wasn't even there. His tiny cries were muffled against the layers of thrift store blankets she'd bundled him in, but she could feel his shivers. Worse, she could feel his body going still. "Noah, please," she whispered, voice cracking like the ice underfoot. "Stay with me, baby. Just stay with me." Hours earlier, she had still been in her childhood bedroom. Posters of summer festivals she never got to attend still lined the walls. On her dresser sat the last thing her mother ever gave her, a framed Bible verse about obedience and grace. That irony wasn't lost on Emily as she stood in the living room, her infant son in one arm and her entire life in a single duffel bag. "You've made your choice," her father said, his voice sharp, final. "I made the right choice," Emily replied, tears threatening but held back by sheer will. "I kept my son. And now you can keep going. Not under our roof." Her mother didn't even speak. She just looked away. They didn't ask if she had a plan. Didn't care that it was 11 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping fast. Her father opened the door and gestured outwards, like she was some delivery being returned. She stepped out with dignity. That didn't last long. Now, hours later, her feet were numb, her fingers raw, and the baby wasn't crying anymore. That silence was far worse than screams. She had tried. Called every number in her phone. Left voicemails that would never be returned. Her best friend had moved back in with her conservative grandparents. Her cousin offered to send money but was 2 states away. Noah's father, Jack, had blocked her the same week she told him about the pregnancy. "I have a scholarship on the line," he'd said. "You're not ruining that too." She'd never hated anyone the way she hated herself in that moment, for not seeing what he was before it was too late. Emily had gone to a church youth retreat when she was 17 and came home pregnant 3 weeks later. Her parents had told the congregation she was taking time off school for mental health. What they didn't say was that the time off involved weekly threats, tears behind closed doors, and a relentless push to put her baby up for adoption. "We can find a nice Christian couple," her mother had whispered once. "They'll love him. And you can still have your future." But she didn't want a future without her son. So now her future was this. A night so cold she couldn't feel her toes. Her body aching from carrying Noah too long. Her thoughts spiraling faster than the wind curling through the pines. The town bus station had closed early. The shelter turned her away. "No beds tonight, sorry." She tried the hospital ER, but they said they couldn't take people in unless there was an emergency. She was starting to think maybe that's what it was. An emergency. Emily sat on a snow-covered bench at the edge of nowhere, tucking her son closer. "I'm sorry," she whispered, rocking slightly. "I'm so sorry." She looked up at the empty road. Not one car had passed in almost 2 hours. Just the snow falling harder, quieter, heavier. She had one thought. This is how people disappear. She wasn't even scared of dying for herself. She could have folded right there on that bench, curled into herself, and disappeared into the silence. But Noah. No. Not him. He deserved better than this. She forced herself to stand, wincing as the blood returned to her feet like fire. "We'll walk," she said out loud, like saying it made it more real. "We'll find someone. A gas station. A porch light. Anything." 1 foot after another. Sinking into snow so deep it nearly pulled off her shoes. And then, headlights. At first, she thought she imagined them. A flicker behind her eyelashes. But then she heard it, a low, grumbling engine and tires crunching through packed snow. She turned. A battered old camper van chugged toward her, its roof sagging under snow, its sides dented, and a tarp flapping off the back like a flag of surrender. It slowed beside her, engine idling with a metallic cough. The driver's window rolled down with a whine that matched the storm wind. Inside sat a woman, wild gray curls tucked into a beanie, her coat patched with old scouting badges and duct tape. Her face looked carved from mountains, sharp and creased with time. "You look like hell," she said without preamble. Her voice was dry and gravelly. Emily didn't answer. Just held Noah tighter. "You waiting for someone?" the woman asked. She shook her head. "You have anywhere to go?" "No," Emily said, her voice barely audible. The woman stared at her for a moment, eyes narrowed. Then she looked at the baby. "He breathing?" Emily flinched. "He's cold. Too cold." Without another word, the woman reached over, unlocked the passenger door, and leaned across to shove it open. A blast of warm air and the scent of pine, tobacco, and something medicinal hit Emily in the face. "Well," the woman said, "get in before the storm eats you alive." Emily didn't move. "I'm not gonna hurt you, kid," the woman added, softer this time. "But the storm? It doesn't care if you're scared." Noah whimpered, just a whisper of a cry. It was enough. Emily climbed in. The door slammed shut behind her, and just like that, the cold was on the outside. Inside, the van was a chaos of books, mugs, and hanging crystals. The dashboard was a mini museum, carved birds, pinned insects, a broken compass, and an old Polaroid of a woman holding a baby. The woman extended a gloved hand. "Iris Monroe," she said. "Biologist. Semi-retired. Slightly nuts." "You?" "Emily," she answered. "And this is Noah." Iris glanced at the baby and nodded once. "Good name. Biblical, but not preachy." She hit the gas, and the van rumbled forward. Emily stared out the window at the empty road. Her heart still raced, torn between terror and relief. But one thing was certain. She had just stepped into the unknown. Betrayal. It hits you hardest when it comes from the people who once called you God's greatest gift. For Emily Carter, betrayal wasn't a single moment. It was a slow-motion collapse, first in whispers, then in cold silences, then in the slam of a front door. Growing up in her parents' home, Emily had always believed in rules. In routines. In Sunday dresses and memorized Bible verses and secondhand stories about God's mercy. But when she stood in their living room holding a newborn, mercy wasn't offered. What mattered wasn't her pain or the baby's needs. What mattered was reputation. Her father, once the man who taught her to ride a bike, who clapped louder than anyone at her school spelling bee, couldn't even look her in the eye. "You've embarrassed this family," he said. "And God sees that too." Her mother, who used to braid her hair before school, stood behind him, lips tight, hands clenched. She didn't say the words, but she didn't stop them either. They said they were doing what was best. But what they really meant was easiest. And the betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, physical, cruel. No money. No calls. Not even a blanket for the baby. All for choosing to keep her son. Resilience. But Emily didn't break. Not then. Not even when the snow reached her ankles. Not when her phone died or her baby whimpered in his sleep, cheeks pink with cold. Because she had made a choice. She chose her son, Noah, over safety. Over comfort. Over everything she'd ever known. It would have been easier to hand him over. Sign the papers. Not along with the church ladies who said, "You're being very mature about this." Easier to disappear for 9 months and come back with a clean slate. But Emily wasn't interested in being easier anymore. Inside the cluttered cabin that Iris Monroe called home, she learned something unexpected. Not just how to keep a fire going. Or how to stretch soup for 3 days. Or how to keep a baby warm when the power goes out. She learned that strength wasn't loud. It wasn't pretty. It was quiet, stubborn, and relentless. Like the way she fed Noah at 2 a.m. even when her arms trembled with exhaustion. Like the way she held back tears when Iris taught her to wash cloth diapers in ice-cold water. Like the way she asked questions about plants, about birds, about life, when she could have curled up and gone numb. Resilience looked nothing like she expected. But it looked a lot like survival. And eventually, it looked like living. Justice. Not courtroom justice. Not the kind that comes with gavels and statements and slow-moving systems. No, Emily found justice in the power of choice. She chose who got to stay in her life. And who didn't. Months after the storm, her parents called. Her mother cried. Her father, recovering from a mild heart attack, asked to see his granddaughter. They didn't apologize. Not really. They offered opportunities wrapped in guilt. Come home, let us help you now. We'll pay for school. We can raise Noah together. Emily listened. She nodded. Then she said no. Because what they wanted wasn't reconciliation. They wanted her to erase everything that happened. But she'd lived through it. And now she had something more powerful than their money or pity. She had a home. Not a big one. Not fancy. But filled with warmth, knowledge, and the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. She had plans. A university acceptance letter. A babysitter who taught Noah about cloud formations and bird calls. A purpose that stretched beyond diapers and bills. And she had a voice. When Noah's father showed up unannounced one day, holding a gift and asking to talk, Emily let him speak. He talked about the past, about mistakes, about second chances. Then he asked if they could maybe figure things out. She looked at Noah. Then she looked at Iris, silently watching from the doorway. And she said, "You don't get to walk away from the fire and come back when the house is warm again." That was her justice. Not revenge. Just clarity. A clear-eyed understanding that her life was hers now, and only the people who'd earned their place would get to stay. Iris Monroe wasn't the woman Emily expected to save her life. But then again, nothing about Iris ever fit inside expectations. The first time Emily saw her, gravel-voiced, silver-haired, bundled in a patchwork coat, she thought she might be crazy. By week 2 in the cabin, she was sure of it. Iris spoke to plants. Not in passing, conversations. She greeted her ferns with Latin names and scolded her moss samples for wilting under pressure. She brewed tea from dried herbs hanging from the rafters and read medical textbooks like bedtime stories. The woman kept a taxidermy fox on a shelf near the fireplace. But beneath the eccentricity was a mind sharper than steel. Iris Monroe had once been a university professor. Published. Respected. A scientist who studied the Arctic ecosystems before climate change became a political buzzword. But that was before Avery. Her daughter. The room down the hallway, soft yellow walls, untouched for decades, was Avery's. She never said it outright. But Emily could feel the grief seep through the floorboards. Iris didn't talk about Avery for months. But when she finally did, she told the story like she was peeling her own skin back, slow, painful, and necessary. A child lost during a blizzard. A mother's stubbornness. A silence that lasted nearly 20 years. But in Emily, Iris saw something old and something new. She never called her daughter. Never tried to replace what was gone. But she made space. Space for Emily to rest. To rebuild. To believe in something again. Sometimes the way Iris looked at Noah made Emily feel like she wasn't raising him alone. Thomas Keller came into their lives on a snowmobile, carrying a bag of groceries and a weathered smile. "I teach history," he said, shaking Emily's hand like it wasn't freezing out. "And I deliver to hermits who live too far off the grid for Amazon." He was everything Iris wasn't: social, calm, pragmatic. A bridge between the world Iris had left behind and the one Emily didn't know how to return to. Thomas never pried. Never questioned why a teenage girl was living in the woods with a retired scientist. He just brought what they needed: food, batteries, updates on the town. And slowly, hope. He told Emily about the local high school's program for young parents. About scholarships. About legal steps she could take to get back into school and claim her independence. "You're not stuck," he said once, over mugs of instant coffee. "You just need someone to point out the door." And when Emily hesitated, scared of the world outside the cabin, he looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You already survived the hardest part. The rest? That's just paperwork." Thomas was more than a teacher. He became a quiet mentor. The kind of adult who didn't demand respect but earned it. And when Jackson came back, it was Thomas who stood beside her, wordless, solid, present. Sometimes, Justice arrives on a snowmobile, carrying baby formula and good advice. Jackson Whitmore had been a memory. A shadow. The boy who'd kissed her under bleachers, whispered promises, and vanished the second real life came knocking. She never expected to see him again. But 6 months after Noah was born, after snow and silence and slow healing, he showed up. Driving a Prius. Wearing a college hoodie. And carrying a teddy bear like it could make up for everything. "I didn't know," he said, standing at the cabin porch, eyes wide. "I didn't understand what it meant." Emily stared at him. "You blocked my number." "I panicked." "You left." "I was scared. And I was 19 and bleeding and raising a human alone." He looked like he wanted to cry. Maybe he did. But Emily didn't have tears left to spend on him. He wanted to help. To be involved. To be part of the picture. But the truth was, the picture had already been painted, and Jackson wasn't in it. She let him hold Noah. Watched as her son stared at the man like he was a stranger. Because he was. Jackson's visit didn't end in yelling or slamming doors. It ended with quiet realization. Some people are stories from your past. They're not villains. But they don't belong in your ending. Not unless they've earned their way back in. And Jackson? He hadn't. Emily's mother called when spring returned. Her voice was thinner than Emily remembered. Softer. Worn down by time and guilt. "I miss you," she said. "We made a mistake." Emily stood in the cabin doorway, Noah balanced on her hip, the phone cold in her hand. "I forgive you," she replied. She meant it. But forgiveness isn't permission. It's not a reset button. It's just a release. Her mother wanted her home. Wanted to make things right. offered money, tuition, a room, a fresh start. But what she really wanted was control again. Emily felt it in every sentence. Every offer wrapped in conditions. Come back. To our rules. To our church. To the version of you we can explain. But Emily had changed. She had learned to say no. Not with bitterness. Not with rage. Just clarity. Noah and I already have a home, she said. And we're not hiding anymore. Her mother cried. Emily didn't. She held Noah tighter and went back inside, to the warmth of a fire, to the sound of Iris explaining something about tree rings and climate shifts. To the family she built, not the one that tried to break her. Secondary characters don't just fill space. They test us. Shape us. Hold up mirrors we'd rather not look into. Iris showed Emily what resilience looks like after loss. Thomas showed her that kindness doesn't always need a reason. Jackson reminded her that absence can't be undone with good intentions. And her mother? She reminded her that love without acceptance is just control in disguise. Emily didn't need a perfect support system. She just needed a few real ones. For all its warmth and clutter, Iris Monroe's cabin had one cold spot. A locked blue door. It didn't match the rest of the place, where drawers overflowed, curtains danced with every draft, and shelves buckled under the weight of journals and dried herbs. That door, however, stood still. Closed. Untouched. Untouchable. A handwritten sign dangled from a single nail. Avery's room. Keep out. The first time Emily noticed it, she felt something shift in the air, like the cabin itself exhaled and went still. She asked nothing. Said nothing. But she never forgot it. Over the next few weeks, the mystery only grew. Why would Iris, a woman who had let Emily into every part of her wild, rambling life, keep one room sealed? And who was Avery? Iris never spoke her name. Never walked near the door. She swept past it like it didn't exist. But silence leaves shadows. And silence always has a history. Emily didn't pry. Until the generator died. It was the coldest night of the year. The cabin's rooms turned to iceboxes in hours. Iris calmly moved their sleeping space into the main room, near the wood stove, dragging mattresses, layering quilts. Check the trunk by my bed, she told Emily. There are more blankets there. Emily found them. Thick wool ones. Heavy. But there was also a small leather-bound book. At first, she thought it was another of Iris's endless journals. But when she picked it up, it was empty inside. No pages. Just a hollow center. And tacked within, a key. Old. Brass. Tied with a blue ribbon. She didn't need to guess what it opened. Her fingers trembled. She told herself to put it back. But curiosity, especially the kind that grows in silence, doesn't go quietly. That night, Iris stood at the wood stove, feeding it carefully cut birch logs, mumbling to herself about oxygen flow and burn time. Emily moved quietly toward the hallway. The flashlight beam wavered against the walls. She stood in front of the blue door, heart pounding. The sign swayed slightly as if warning her. Still, she slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoother than she expected, like it had been used recently. Or maybe often. The door creaked open. What lay inside took her breath away. A nursery. Frozen in time. Pale yellow walls with hand-painted forest animals. A crib in the center of the room, made of dark wood and draped with a quilt that looked hand-stitched. A rocking chair in the corner with an Afghan folded over the back. Shelves of children's books from the 1980s. Stacks of yellowing diapers. A tiny dresser. It didn't look abandoned. It looked, waiting for someone who never came back. Emily stepped in, overwhelmed by the scent of old wood and lavender. Dust floated like memory in the flashlight beam. On the dresser stood a silver-framed photograph. A younger Iris. Hair longer. Face softer. Eyes full of something Emily had never seen in her before, joy. She held a baby in her arms. And in the frame's bottom corner, a name. Avery Grace Monroe. July 14, 1986. Emily didn't hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. You weren't supposed to come in here. She turned. Iris stood in the doorway. Face pale. Lips tight. Voice flat. I'm sorry, Emily whispered. I found the key. I know where I left it, Iris said sharply. Then, softer, you should go. But Emily didn't move. Because the woman in the photo, the one who looked transformed by love, was the same woman who had taught her how to tend a fire, rock a baby, and trust again. She deserved to be known. What happened? Emily asked, gently. Iris didn't answer. Not at first. She walked slowly into the room. Touched the crib. Adjusted a stuffed bear. Finally, she sat in the rocking chair. Her hands folded in her lap like a ritual. And she told the story. I was 34. A professor at the university. Tenure track. Arctic ecosystems. Summers in the field. Winters in lecture halls. I didn't want marriage. But I wanted a child. I made an arrangement with a colleague. He didn't want to be involved. I kept it quiet. Wore loose clothes. Took a sabbatical to write a book. I came here. Alone. Avery was born during a summer storm. It was the happiest day of my life. Her voice cracked, but only slightly. We lived here part-time. She loved it. The snow, the birds, the animals. She was bright. Fearless. But the winter she turned 3, it came early. And hard. She caught a cold. Just a cough at first. But it got worse. Fast. The phone lines were down. Roads closed. No help coming. I wrapped her in blankets and tried to drive to town. We made it 5 miles. The truck got stuck. She died before help arrived. Silence. Only the sound of wind pressing against the windows. I came back, Iris continued. Buried her next to the oak tree. Shut this room. Shut myself down. People stopped calling. I stopped answering. She looked up then. At Emily. Her eyes hollow. And then I saw you. In that storm. Holding your child. And I couldn't let it happen again. Emily felt tears on her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. Iris, she whispered, stepping closer. You saved us. The older woman nodded once. Maybe she sent you. Maybe not. I don't believe in signs. But something in her voice said she might. Emily knelt beside her. Reached for her hand. They sat like that for a long time. 3 women. 1 gone. 1 healing. 1 just beginning. Spring in Montana is a slow undoing. The snow doesn't melt so much as retreat, shyly, like it knows it overstayed its welcome. Trees bud in silence. The air starts to smell less like ice and more like possibility. Emily had grown with the season. Her hands were stronger now, cut and calloused from splitting logs and learning survival the hard way. Her eyes were sharper. Her voice? Steadier than it had ever been. She no longer flinched when the phone rang. So when Iris handed her the satellite phone that afternoon and said, "It's your mother," Emily didn't freeze. She answered. "Emily?" The voice was soft, trembling. "It's me." "I know." A pause. "We want you home. Your father had a heart scare. It changed things." Another pause. "We have a room ready. We can help with Noah. You can go back to school. Everything can go back to normal." There it was. Normal. That word again. The life they wanted back wasn't hers, it never had been. Emily listened. And then, calmly, she said, "I'm not coming back to be fixed. I'm not broken. I'm building something new." The silence on the other end was heavy. Familiar. A disappointed pause that once would have made her back down. Not this time. They arrived a week later. Her mother. Her father. Dressed like they were going to church, stiff collars and nervous smiles. The SUV was spotless, gleaming, out of place on the muddy cabin path. An hour after that, Jackson showed up. And this time, he brought reinforcements. His parents. Suddenly, the cabin was full. Too full. Voices overlapping. Eyes watching. Everyone talking about Emily's future like she wasn't standing in the middle of it. Her mother offered college tuition. His father offered housing. Her father apologized without saying the word sorry. Jackson spoke in we like they were still something. "You and Noah can move into our guest house," Jackson's mother said. "We'll help with the baby. You'll be free to go to class, maybe even get a part-time job. And marry," his father added. That would be the right next step. Emily looked at Jackson. He was standing by the bookshelf, nervously fiddling with one of Iris's crystals, as if looking for permission to speak. "You never even called," she said flatly. "Not once." "I know," he said. "But I'm here now. You blocked me. I panicked. You didn't panic. You chose to disappear. And now that it's convenient, you reappear." He winced, but said nothing. The conversation at the table turned to logistics. Daycare. Finances. Church. Living arrangements. Schedules. Everyone had a plan for her. Everyone except Iris. She stood by the window, silent. Watching. Listening. Letting Emily find her footing. And when her mother said, "You don't have to live like this out here, like some survivalist," Iris raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet. Emily stood. No shaking. No stuttering. Just a deep breath. One she had earned. "I appreciate all your offers," she began. "But let me be clear." Her voice cut through the room like a match struck in the dark. "I don't need saving. I'm not a problem to solve. I'm not a wayward daughter or a regret to be erased." She looked at Jackson. "And I'm not your unfinished business." She looked at her mother. "I'm not a cautionary tale you get to edit for your friends at church." And then, she looked at Iris. "I'm a mother. A student. A scientist in training. And I already have a family. Right here." Silence. Then Noah cried from the other room. Iris moved first, picking him up, rocking him gently, whispering something about cranky moon phases and teething patterns. Emily watched them, her heart calm for the first time in hours. When she turned back, her guests were standing awkwardly, like people who had just realized they were no longer in charge of the script. Her father looked tired. Her mother, pale. Jackson looked like he might cry. But Emily didn't offer comfort. She didn't explain herself. She didn't apologize for the walls they built, because they were the ones who walked out first. She simply said, "Thank you for coming. But this is our life now. You're welcome to visit, but you don't get to write the ending." As the SUVs pulled away, kicking up mud and regret, Iris stepped beside her on the porch. "You did good," she said, handing over a warm bottle for Noah. Emily smiled. Felt like standing in a courtroom. It was. She turned, catching Iris's expression just before she looked away. "You okay?" "I've never been more proud," Iris said quietly. "But if you tell anyone I said that, I'll deny it." They laughed. A soft, healing sound. Inside, Noah gurgled. Outside, spring arrived in earnest. The confrontation wasn't explosive. It wasn't violent or dramatic. It was something more dangerous. It was final. Emily chose her path that day, not just to survive, but to lead. She had faced the people who wanted to rewrite her story and told them no. And that kind of strength? It's the kind that doesn't fade. It only grows. The days grew longer. In Fairbanks, Alaska, where Emily now lived in a modest, sunlit craftsman house owned by Iris, the sun hung in the sky like it had nowhere else to be. Time stretched wide, and for the first time in Emily's life, she didn't feel like she was racing against it. Noah was crawling now. Babbling. Dropping spoonfuls of pureed carrots onto the kitchen floor and laughing like he'd discovered comedy. And Emily? She was enrolled at the University of Alaska, studying environmental science with a focus on climate data and field biology. Her textbooks were dog-eared. Her notes were color-coded. And her advisor already called her promising. But her real education happened off-campus. In the evenings, while Noah napped, she and Iris sat in the living room surrounded by stacks of journals, decades of handwritten observations about Arctic species, migration shifts, plant blooming cycles, and permafrost changes. "These should be in a database," Emily had said once, flipping through a 1994 entry so detailed it read like scientific poetry. "I don't do bureaucracy," Iris muttered. "Then I will." And so they began. Together, they digitized Iris's lifetime of research. Line by line. Entry by entry. What started as preservation became transformation. The Legacy Project. Iris Monroe's lifework, once confined to weathered leather books and tea-stained field notes, was now being turned into a searchable, shareable scientific archive. And it had Emily's name on the front page too. The mornings began with routine. Emily would prep Noah's diaper bag while Iris heated breakfast, always making it into a lesson. "These are cloudberries," Iris said, placing 2 in front of the baby. "They only grow in specific tundra conditions. And they're packed with vitamin C." Noah, of course, just smashed them on the table. But Iris smiled anyway. In the afternoons, while Emily was at class or studying, Iris became the most unconventional babysitter in Fairbanks. She read aloud to Noah from her journals. Let him crawl around pine cones and lichen samples. Once, she built a tiny terrarium labeled Noah's Arctic Dome. Most children learned their colors through cartoons. Noah? He learned them from soil samples. And something else began to happen. Iris changed. Not all at once, but slowly. Her posture softened. Her voice lost its constant edge. Her laughter, rare and sharp, became more frequent, more real. And the blue door? Avery's room? It remained unlocked. Not as a shrine, but as a space reclaimed. They didn't redecorate it. But now, when Noah napped there during the day, Iris would sometimes sit nearby, not grieving. Just remembering. In late October, a professor at the university reached out. "We heard about your mother's journals," he said to Emily during a seminar. "We'd love for her to present them. Maybe as part of our speaker series on long-range ecological observation." Emily blinked. She's not my mother. Then she paused. She's something better. The presentation was simple. A classroom. A projector. And Iris, standing there in her patched coat, holding a laser pointer like it was a hunting knife. She spoke for an hour, clear, confident, unfiltered. No PowerPoint fluff. Just data. Stories. Truth. Climate doesn't whisper, she said. It speaks in species that don't return, in flowers that bloom too soon, in snow that stays too long. At the end, the room was silent. Then came applause. Not polite. Real. 2 weeks later, Iris received a letter. The National Science Journal wanted to reprint her early findings. Apparently, I was ahead of my time, she said dryly. Emily just grinned. The world finally caught up. The cabin in Pine Hollow didn't stay empty. They returned every summer, Noah squealing as he chased dragonflies, Iris pointing out constellations at midnight, Emily journaling observations like Iris once had. One July afternoon, Iris showed Emily something folded deep in the back of a drawer. A birth certificate. Avery's. This belongs to you now, she said, placing it in Emily's hands. You'll know what to do with it. That fall, Emily stood at the front of her ecology class, presenting a collaborative project titled Intergenerational Ecological Legacy, the Monroe Carter Archives. She spoke clearly. She answered questions with poise. And when someone asked what made her pursue this field, she didn't hesitate. I was rescued in a snowstorm, she said. By a scientist who taught me that survival isn't enough. That healing matters. That data matters. And that love, real love, creates legacy. That night, after Noah fell asleep and Iris returned from the greenhouse, Emily opened her laptop and typed something new into the top of the research site. In memory of Avery Grace Monroe. And in honor of every mother who chose to begin again. Iris didn't say a word. She just placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, her eyes filled with quiet tears. They had become something rare. A family not bound by blood. But by choice. By survival. By the courage to rewrite the ending.